NBs, ladies, gentlemen, today I'm going to be talking about the Witcher games, but with a very specific focus. It's going to be important for this video to understand the plot of Witcher 1 and a brief overview of Witchers 1 and 2, but in another part in this series I'm going to go into much more detail about the plot, the development history, and the fan and critical reception. For now though, Witcher 1. Witcher 1 is about Geralt of Rivia miraculously back from the dead and freshly amnesiated, now confronted with a siege on Kaer Morhen, the Witcher's Keep, by sinister goons bent on stealing the Witcher secrets. One young Witcher is killed and the secrets are stolen, and Geralt embarks on a journey to avenge his comrade, regain his memory, and get back the secrets of his trade from the Professor. Along the way he meets Alvin, a young boy who has powers a lot like Ciri's. Alvin jumps through time halfway through the story, and learning about the apocalypse foretold in Ithlin's prophecy, decides the best thing to help humanity survive is to get rid of all the other races right away so they have time to work on surviving. Good job, Alvin. You fucking nailed it. Alvin travels back in time and establishes the Order of the Flaming Rose, who are racist religious extremists who persecute and lynch non-humans and are generally pushing towards total genocide. They, through the Salamandra Gang and the Professor, steal the Witcher secrets, set Geralt off on his quest where he meets Alvin, exposes Alvin to the race riots caused by the Order, causing Alvin to jump through time in the first place. Good job, Alvin. You fucking nailed it. Alvin's plan is revealed to Geralt through endless monologuing. Then Geralt kills Alvin with his silver sword. You see, that sword is for monsters. And then Geralt maybe later suspects that this grown man who was weirdly invested in winning his approval was actually a grown-up version of the boy he was taking care of before. Good job, Alvin. You fucking nailed it. Oh, and along the way, Geralt almost definitely has a lot of sex with a lot of women. Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings focuses on the political upheaval in the Northern Realms caused by multiple assassinations of kings, and you, as Geralt, fight to clear your name of the murder of King Foltest and to help the political factions you most agree with. Oh, and along the way, Geralt almost definitely has a lot of sex with a lot of women. Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt is an enormous and complex masterpiece, essentially in itself a massive game, but including the DLCs Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, 2 whole extra games on top of that. The very simplistic overview is that now Geralt has his memory back, he's trying to reunite with his long-missing adopted daughter Siri, and then once he finds her, help her prevent the end of the world. Oh, and along the way, Geralt almost definitely has a lot. A little bit of context here. In the books, women are described with a lot of sexual agency. Sometimes they're straight, sometimes they're gay, sometimes they use sex as a means to an end. But more importantly, because this is the thing that's shockingly rare, women just enjoy sex because women in real life just enjoy sex because sex is pretty neat. For example, a central character in the last book, Nimu, is described having sex with a man, and that's all we know about him. He's a nameless, faceless man body, and she's with him because it's fun. I know it seems like I'm overstating something very plain here, but typically in media, women's emotions and internal life when it comes to sex is more or less totally erased. All the focus is either on the feelings of the men, or catered for a presumed straight male audience. The way these books treat sexuality is actually very refreshing. Ciri, a teenage girl, is more and more the protagonist throughout the series. The Witcher originally refers to Geralt, and by the end it refers to Ciri. She's the Witcher, and he isn't anymore. Correspondingly, Ciri's sexuality is more and more relevant throughout, with her early fixation of the sorceress's beauty, her girlfriend Missile later on, and eventually riding off into the sunset with Sir Galahad. Yes, that Sir Galahad. In the games, however, although Ciri is an adult, she's barely there at all, and when she is, she certainly isn't given much sexual agency. In fact, her sexuality is treated as quite inappropriate, because she isn't seen as the player or the protagonist, she's seen as the protagonist's daughter. In the spa scene on Skellige, for example, Ciri sits around with the woman who's been hosting her and her mother, and on first blush here, my instinct is the nudity here is pretty cool. Just some gals sitting around, free titting it. Great! But Ciri is covered up, very pointedly covered up in a specific way too, and eventually I have to confront that this is telling us that women's bodies can't possibly be seen without being sexual, and furthermore that Ciri can't be naked because she's our daughter. Sex scenes, much like action scenes, can be exciting and titillating, and therefore simply good on their own grounds, and that's pretty exciting. Furthermore, in a story with sex scenes, you can have two characters state who they are and what they believe in, and then come together and create a shifting power dynamic and unite their two bodies in a way that represents the conflict of the story. In, say, Dragon Ball Z, you can have two characters state who they are and what they believe in, and then come together and create a shifting power dynamic, and unite their two bodies in a way that represents the conflict of the story. Geralt of Rivia and Goku... What was I saying? I just want to be crystal clear that I think that eroticism in media is absolutely fascinating. And if I weren't on YouTube, there are videos I'd like to make about the delineation between porn and other media, the long-running erotic webcomic Alfie, and a deep dive into eroticism in video games. I am firmly pro-filth. If you want to explore this topic more, Dan Olsen did a great job of looking at sex and relationships portrayed on screen in his trilogy on 50 Shades of Grey, and a positively stunning job when looking at what can make a sex scene great in his video about Tuca and Bertie. Patty Taxon has an excellent video talking over why the Netflix animated anthology series Love, Death and Robots is horny in just the most tedious way possible. The horniness itself isn't inherently bad, but it reinforces a very straight male sexuality, and a very narrow one at that. And even beyond that, the way female bodies are sexualized is done in an actively dehumanizing way. And that's more or less the root of the problem in Witcher 3. There are little things that wind up being super gross, clumsy, careless, shallow treatment of sexuality that stumbles ass backwards into troubling territory. For example, the recycling of different character models is a bit janky, but recycling the character model from the Baron's young daughter, who we are surely supposed to see as analogous for the daughter Geralt is searching for, and using that same character model for a sex worker that Geralt can have sex with is... what's the word here? Bad. To be fair though, that's how mistreatment of horniness generally is, right? Folks just clumsily follow their instincts, and sometimes the result is total ass. The sex scenes in the game generally use the character models in several predetermined animations with dip to black cuts in between. It's procedurally generated sex. Hot, right folks? Not just that, but the dip to black transition with the brevity of each shot culminates in a style that just feels embarrassed to be doing what it's doing. I'm not asking for there to be no sex scenes, but watching a sex scene that feels ashamed of itself is very off-putting. I think the dip to black is supposed to be kind of classy while also implying that some time is passing between each cut, but considering that the time between each scene isn't all that long diegetically, it feels a lot more like the camera is telling us, shut your eyes, stop looking. There are well-established ways using simple jump cuts to show a lot of time passing between different events while also establishing a mood and direction. And this is actually closer to the style that they use in Witcher 2. So in a way, even though the characters in Witcher 2 were uncanny valley cursed flesh puppets, it feels like they took a bit of a step backwards with the scenes of Witcher 3. Furthermore, one of the pre-generated animations has the woman Geralt is sleeping with react with fear when he takes off his shirt and shows his scars. Now on its own, this could be sexy, it could be compelling. With a character who has a certain dynamic with Geralt, it could advance the plot and show us something about his character. Hell, this is the way in which he's supposed to be sexy, right? Women want Geralt because of his bad boy, dangerous lifestyle. Except for two things. This is one of a set of stock animations that are all meant to be as uncomplicatedly sexy as each other, and the proc-gen sex scenes only happen when Geralt employs sex workers. So watching this scene, the male power fantasy of him frightening this sex worker and her being afraid in a sexual context is just kind of gross, especially as it has no relation to the rest of the text. Again, this could be, done deliberately, a very interesting creative choice. I talked about this in my look at the Netflix show. Geralt is fetishized by women for being a dangerous man, and the flip side is that he is seen as someone who will come seduce your wife or your daughter or sister, and this stereotype is dangerous to him. This has some real-world historical precedent. CD Projekt Red nearly never make Geralt sexy through the entire series. The famous bathtub scene shows a willingness to put something in there for everyone, but the camera feels almost allergic to the naked male body the rest of the time, except for to glorify Geralt's powerful muscles. For all it shows us of the women that Geralt sleeps with, it never once shows us Geralt's bare ass or dong.
The dong?
The dong. The dong.
Well, I think that the studio was thinking the gratuitous nudity was maybe a bit much.
Fuck you.
In Witcher 2, there were horrible problems too. The most outstanding thing to me is the treatment of Vez, a character in the Temerian Blue Stripes under Vernon Roche. Roche, okay? Roche. Roche is Geralt's horse. Roche. Roche. She's Roche's right-hand woman and clearly an excellent fighter not to be messed with. And for some fucking reason, the writers thought it would be an interesting plot development to have her sexually assaulted twice. Not just that, but Geralt can also sleep with her, because of course he can, because what the fuck. The sex scene with Vess happens between the two times that she gets assaulted, and to trigger it you have to beat her in a duel. I'm having trouble with this one, guys. What the fuck were you actually thinking? In the lead up to the sex scene, Vess says she doesn't want to be seen as just a sex object, and I think this shows the writers had some kind of feminist equality struggle in mind for her, but then why would you have her assaulted twice and also have her literally be a sex object for the player? She says she doesn't want to be seen as a sex object, but that she has her needs as a woman, which, besides being pig shit writing, is a little closer to how sex is in the books. But then, again, why in the holy cursed fuck would you do this? Deliberately or not, they are appropriating the aesthetics of female sexual empowerment here for the purposes of turning on horny gamers. This could be the clearest example of where they were trying to achieve some sort of point or message about female sexual agency and gender equality, and then right at the last minute, all the writers took boner pills and just started typing the rest of the script with their dicks. Similarly, they incorporated a whole bunch of mages from the books in Witcher 2, and it's pretty cool to see most of the Lodge of Sorceresses represented, and not just as copy-paste personalities of the same scheming evil witch over and over, but as rounded, fleshed-out characters, somewhat like in the books. However, the treatment of these sorceresses also has some weird Viagra script jank. Book context time. After the insurrection on the Isle of Thaneth by anime villain and best husbando wizard Vilgefortz on behalf of Nilfgaard, the mages of the continent got all fucked up. See, every king has to have a mage or else he's just gonna get punked in a war against another nation that has magic. But Vilgefortz's loyalty to Nilfgaard let him pull this top 10 anime betrayal shit, and so afterwards, some of the sorceresses formed the Lodge, on the understanding that mages in the Lodge would never turn on one another in the same way again. By the end of the books, those witchy women have become a problematic political power, and they're yet another one of the factions who are trying to get Siri to have a baby for them so they could rule the world. And so in Witcher 2, we see that every other political power is pretty wary of the sorceresses. This leads up to a bunch of the sorceresses getting fucked up and or killed throughout Witcher 2, which frankly can end up feeling like the writers just taking out some sort of repressed anger at women at points. It leads into the persecution of magic users and witch hunts in Witcher 3, which is done way better, but it still feels odd in places here. Alongside that, there's Philippa Eilhart specifically, witch, political schemer, badass, and magic lesbian laser owl.
Silver harms.
That's not how flying works.
Shut up, Dwan.
Holy shit, she's shooting laser beams! Oh my god! This fucking rules! Philippa's the coolest owl in existence. She's shooting laser beams! In the books, Philippa's gayness is an interesting point. Other sorceresses in the Lodge are sometimes weird about her being a lesbian, but for the most part it doesn't really come up, and she's a very cool character. In one scene she receives a late night phone call. Sorry, magic phone call, and she has lipstick kisses on her, but the witch she's talking to thinks to herself about how easy it would have been to get cleaned up before answering the call. It's a power move. It's clearly Philippa owning other people's homophobia and weaponizing her sexuality against them. It kinda rules! In Witcher 2, by contrast, Geralt walks in on Philippa having sex twice. It's not in the middle of the night, it's just whenever you happen to go to her house, and it's not a power move and her stunting on you, it's just there to turn on horny gamers. Look, There are parts of Philippa relating to her sexuality in Witcher 2 that are really well written, actually. When Saskia is poisoned, Philippa cures her, and as a final step, kisses her with a magic petal on her lips. One of the guys in the room makes a comment about this,
My favourite type of magic, lesbomancy.
which distracts the audience away from why is she doing this to dude, shut the fuck up. And that's actually really clever because the kiss wasn't necessary, and the twist revealed later on is that Philippa was actually enthralling Saskia with a spell, and in keeping with the books, this seems like the exact kind of thing Philippa Eilhart, magic lesbian laser owl, would pull to disguise her nefarious schemes. Fuck yeah. So it just sucks that when it comes to her sexuality in other regards, flop flop, click clack, there's the script, hope you like it. Especially as, by contrast, Detmold is revealed to be gay very late in the game, and in the same scene he's shown with a male lover, he's grooming himself, something he hasn't really seemed focused on before, and then Vernon Roche busts in seeking revenge for earlier, and murders him and mutilates him. It just reads as a pointedly homophobic attack. Lesbians are there for you to gawp at, gay men have to be punished. With how sensitively Witcher 3 seems to have approached queer characters by contrast, I'm really deeply saddened by this. Right now in Poland, a fascist anti-LGBT movement is endangering queer people. Some LGBT people are fleeing the country, others face smear campaigns, abuse, violence, possibly death. The Polish president Andrzej Duda is a part of this campaign that's trying to rid Poland completely of LGBT people while calling them subhuman, accusing them all of being pedophiles, and all told, seeing all this from a Polish development studio makes me feel like the people writing The Witcher 2 are the kind of people we need a lot less of. But mostly, it just makes me angry and sad. At the end of each part of this Witchermania series, there will be a link to resources that you can use to help fight the hateful fascist movement that's currently affecting Poland. I encourage you to check it out, sign, donate, share. The problems of horniness of the franchise go back to Witcher 1, and in that game, in fact, are really fucking disturbing. In The Witcher, you initiate sex with women by choosing certain dialogue options, often totally benign-seeming ones. In a blog post series describing playing The Witcher, Kateri describes how The Witcher makes having lots of sex with lots of women deeply, deeply unsexy.
So you exchange your imaginary in-game gold for imaginary off-screen in-game sex, and I sit here wondering why. Why would a player choose this? Why would Geralt? Is he that desperate for human contact? Is it a reaction to his mutation, his monsterism, his visible separation from the rest of humanity, that he needs to constantly reaffirm a physical link with his fellow creatures via his cock?
And the thing is, yes, Geralt is actually all those things. He does need to reach out for human contact, he is really lonely, he does seek intimacy and affection almost completely through casual sex. But I sincerely do not believe that the developers were trying to create this effect. I think they saw a series where women are sexually empowered and thought, cool, let's make a game where you are at any moment only one dialogue option away from accidentally boarding the bone train.
Excuse me, I'd like some Elvish lessons. No, I don't want sex. Which way is the alderman's house? Ma'am, please put those away. Sabrina, I collected all the talismans. What did you want to tell? For fuck's sake.
I know Geralt is a straight man, for now, but the heteronormativity of this game feels honestly overwhelming when Geralt says more openly sexual things to men and nothing happens.
Come on, Yevon. Let's pray together in the shade of the trees. Yes, I've actually been admiring your swordsmanship for a while. Dandelion, quick, let's have gay sex!
They accidentally perfectly replicated the effect from the original, where Geralt wanders around, lacking deep intimacy and connection, and is fetishized and prized by women as an exotic, dangerous sex object in a way that makes him quite lonely. And if that were deliberate, I would say it's quite beautiful. But it's not, is it? But all of that aside, that's not the weirdest element of sex in Witcher 1. The weirdest element is that after you've picked your totally normal seeming line and accidentally caused sex to happen, the game doesn't show an actual sex scene. It plays some blurry shapes moving in the background and gives you a romance card. These are attainable for almost every female character in the game, with romance cards for women as developed and important as Triss Merigold and as non-specific as peasants.
Gotta catch 'em all! Gotta catch 'em all! Gotta catch 'em all!
women. It's incredibly sketchy on top of being triggered so often by totally implausible dialogue options. It's often commented on that Triss has sex with Geralt while she knows about the memories he's lost and that she hasn't told him about his relationship with Yennefer. Now, Triss kind of is Yennefer in this game, it's complicated, and I'm not sure they knew they were going to make sequels, but nonetheless, it feels like this game's understanding of consent is iffy at best. Now, that isn't totally without its place. Book Geralt is more of a collectible trophy to women than they are to him. He doesn't brag, he doesn't keep a tally, he doesn't collect trophies like the goddamn Zodiac killer. But women are interested in him for the novelty, so as a marginalized other, he doesn't always have all the agency in sexual situations. In Season of Storms, Geralt is repeatedly sexually harassed by women. But none of that explains all the other weird shit in Geralt's sexual encounters. One woman has sex with Geralt after he saves her from bandits. Abigail has sex with Geralt in order to persuade him not to turn her over to a lynching mob. And Alvin is just kind of there, in the same room. But you can easily avoid all the worst of this, because now it's time to say, do not play Witcher 1. It is so goddamn boring. The walking is so fucking slow, and the levels are so poorly laid out, and so exhausting to navigate. And then there's the drinking. You have to drink with people to complete quests, and then when you're drunk, you walk even slower. And the first 2 chapters are so goddamn ugly too. I've talked to so many people who've quit in chapter 2, and I cannot blame them, because all the best bits of the game are after chapter 2, and chapter 2 is as long as the rest of the entire game. The quests are all padded with a bunch of busy work to just keep you from progressing, and the worst part is that all of this is done with a lot of love, so there is a lot of extra detail you could appreciate, but that doesn't make a fun game. Chapter 2 ends with you getting 10 magic stones, and each one has an associated quest, and 2 of them, 2 quests, involve paying 500 orens to just get the stone. And that's so many orens! Listen, I am not H-Bomber Guy. When I tell you this game is boring, I am not trying to sell it to you. Do not play it. Unless you're a really No! Not even then! Don't play it! This is really just speculation on my part, but I suspect Witcher games fully playing as Siri might be on the cards in the future. And I hope CD Projekt Red can work out their sex problems before that, if they do it. I certainly don't expect to see sex cards in future games, or Siri having sex in front of children she's supposed to protect. Once again, I'm not actually asking them to just be less horny, I'm actually asking them to think harder about being horny. Be horny better, please, CD Projekt Red. I actually think it's a huge shame when they don't think about how the male gaze affects their art, because it's actually incredibly relevant to one of the central themes of the games. Masculinity and fatherhood. The first of the novel series, The Blood of Elves, starts with Ciri training at Kaer Morhen, the Witch's Keep. It's actually the sequence that inspires the opening dream for The Wild Hunt, including a great scene where Geralt teaches Ciri that witches don't fight by parrying blows away from themselves, but by deflecting themselves around the blows, which is some anime shit, and I'm extremely here for it. Ciri is worried she can't be a good witcher because she's weak, because she's a girl. He tells her that the strongest man in the world couldn't deflect a blow from a monster like the ones they fight, so Ciri doesn't need to be strong. She just needs to learn the ways of the Witcher. It's a lovely scene, and it's formative for Ciri's character going forward. Not long after, there's a pretty hysterical moment where Triss Merigold shows up at Kaer Morhen and observes the 3 witches and a baby disaster situation they have set up, and tells off Geralt and Vesemir and the others for not having the first faintest clue how to raise a teenage girl. Apparently, Ciri getting her period and how that might affect her training as a ruthless killing machine for 10 hours a day never occurred to a single one of them. Pretty powerful, smart lads here at Kaer Morhen. Fatherhood is an important personal theme in the Witcher series, and the games play it up even more. Even when Ciri wasn't in the first game, Geralt still had little Alvin to take care of, and with Alvin turning into the CEO of elf racism, the first game really clearly sends the message that our individual actions pale in comparison to the effects of culture and community. It takes a village, etc. The game lets you make choices throughout, but none of them will stop Alvin becoming Mr. Racism, because it's not your choices that affect that, it's the deeply tense, fraught, and racist society that he's raised in that affects that. So just go ahead and have sex in front of him, I guess. It doesn't matter. Alvin isn't simply your kid, he represents the average child in society. This is why he time travels back and changes his name and lives a different life. He's your son and also a stranger? The solution can't just be for you to individually do a better job with this kid. That too, obviously, but society has to improve, and that isn't up to just one single person. The Wild Hunt is absolutely bursting at the seams with dads, and often not very good ones. There's the Bloody Baron who abuses his wife and daughter, there's Emir who wants to wed Siri in an incestuous marriage so he can rule the world. The game seems to be begging us to consider the question, what's wrong with dads? The game even opens with Geralt riding to find Yennefer with his dad, Vesemir, his adopted Witcher dad anyway. We don't know much about Vesemir from the books, and this opening doesn't give us much more. He's an old Witcher. He looks a bit like Geralt, and he loves the Godfather.
Now he wishes to make you an offer.
The kind one can't refuse.
Vesemir is a father to other witches just as Geralt is a father to Ciri, not by blood, but by situation. He claims them by law of surprise. The name Child Surprise sounds like a wink at the idea of an unplanned, unexpected baby, right? And this idea explored for Geralt that destiny ties him to Ciri, usually through these dreams where she's in danger and he's worried about her, feels like an absentee father just knowing that really the right thing to do is go and be there for his kid. Geralt hasn't had an easy or pleasant life. Taken by Vesemir at a young age, he was put through the trials and painful transformations, and most of the other boys he knew going through the Witcher training died, and all that were left were the brutalized killing machines who had suffered like him. It feels all too clear that Geralt expecting to have a son through law of surprise, but getting a daughter, although it's never quite directly addressed, is incredibly vital. All the witches expect to have sons. They expect to take boys to be brutalized and trained and hardened and turned into cold, professional men who lie to themselves that they have no feelings. Having a girl was something Geralt was never ready for. He has this idea of himself, at least at the start of the books, as someone who doesn't care and doesn't get involved. But by the end, Dandelion repeatedly, openly begs him not to intervene in matters of social injustice. That's what happens at the end of the books even. While Geralt is sitting around discussing retiring as a witcher, an angry crowd forms coming to lynch the dwarves in the town in a pogrom, and Geralt intervenes, but is ultimately killed. Of course, Geralt is chronically wrong in his outlook, in his philosophy, and even his image of himself at the start of the books, so not only does he become someone who intervenes, he actually always was. He says that his first monster was a bandit who was threatening a family and intending to rape a young girl, and Geralt stepped in to stop him. And then there's Geralt's musings at the end of the books on what witches are becoming. He says that the balance of good and evil is no longer humans versus wild beasts, and it brings to mind the famous quip. When people ask him if he really has two swords, a steel one for men and a silver one for monsters, he tells them they're both for monsters. Through Ciri's arc, her traditional witch's work, monster slaying, is few and far between, and much, much more of what she does is slaying the other kind of monsters. And she still gets called a witcher. Maybe it's deliberate that in the Wild Hunt, she only has the one sword. There are a lot of story moments you could happily call your favorite in the Witcher games. There are several times when your boy Zoltan shows up and tells you all the themes, and I just love that for its open cheesiness and cheekiness. When Geralt tries to persuade Triss to stay, but then she leaves, but then she comes back, that gets me big time. Speaking of that scene, Dijkstra's speech is great. Of course, who can forget Magic Lesbian Laser Owl? But the moment at the top of Witcher Mountain with Geralt and Lambert is so incredibly stunning and brings so many things together. Lambert and Geralt talk about the Witcher training, about being abducted by Vesemir to be turned into witches, and it really brings things into sharp focus. Throughout the books, the show, the games, people repeat this myth that witches don't have feelings, but just looking at Geralt for a second, you can see that he's a deeply emotional person. If you haven't realized it already, in this scene it comes together that witches are the ones who spread this myth, and they actually spread it so that they have an excuse not to feel. The ordeal of the transformations is so awful and so painful that they need to pretend they can't feel anything just to survive. This is toxic masculinity. By the end of the Wild Hunt with Vesemir gone and the ancient secrets forgotten, the remaining witches decide to just let the wolf school die with them, and the only witcher left is Siri, this new kind of witcher. The witches are going to stop this cycle of men abusing boys into becoming men. The game seems to be begging us to consider the question, what's wrong with dads? And its answer is, dads are boys, and boys are being raised to be monsters. The only witcher left is going to be someone who chose to be one, and instead of going through the ordeal that her predecessors went through simply to make her into the same kind of animal as them. The books and the games have a lot of intelligent, careful, interesting stuff to say about sex, gender, family, and relationships. I just really wish they'd lean into their most sensitive and compassionate side and stop being horny in a way that undercuts their own messages. There's been a lot of controversy about CD Projekt Red's upcoming game Cyberpunk 2077 and how it's attempting to represent trans people. I think it's a huge deal that we're going to get a AAA open world RPG where you can make your character trans. I think it rules, and I also really wish they would talk to some trans people and sort out their awful, embarrassing jank. I think some people at CD Projekt clearly really care, and so I don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. But this is the curse of horny media. When you do it well, it can be really, really good. But when you fuck up, you really, really fuck up. Next time, I want to talk about the development a little more, dive into the plots of all three games in more detail, and examine what being a fan of The Witcher means.
When I'm bored, Grace to ride along with Geralt of Rivia, along came this song. From when the white wolf fought a silver-tongued devil, and omega bells at his hooves did they revel.
I'd like to thank Molly Noyes for composing the excellent score for this video, Mothcub for all the illustrations, all my friends who had to listen to me complaining about sex cards for the last 6 months, my patrons who make this all possible, and you, the viewer, for watching all the way to the end. If you want to become a patron and support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/curiovids and give me $2 or more than $2 to get early access to videos, bonus content including this cover of Tosakointia Witcher, and much, much more. There's a link in the description if you want to find out how you can help with the situation in Poland. I encourage you to check it out. I often replay games on Twitch when I'm writing about them, so if you want to come hear me make some off-the-cuff takes before I write my videos, why not follow me on twitch.com/VaymaSophie. I hope you'll join me next time for the Ballad of Fanboy Geralt, in which I examine the development of the games and my deep personal frustration with the critical reception of the franchise. If you want to see it early, it's up for $2 plus patrons right now, and also my Patreon goal video about Zack Snyder will be up a full month early for patrons. Alright folks, bye for now.
Champion prevailed, he defeated the villain, now pour him some ale.